Hello and welcome to Indus News Live from Islamabad. I'm Hira Mustafa and these are the headlines. The U.S. has paused the $8 billion weapons sale to Saudi Arabia and the UAE authorized by former President Donald Trump. Talking to reporters, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said review of the deal aims to ensure it advances U.S. strategic objectives. Speaking on Iran, he said the U.S. will rejoin the 2015 nuclear deal only if Tehran resumes complete compliance with the pact. The Iraqi army has killed 7 ISIS militants, including 3 group leaders, in a counter-terrorism operation in the north. In a statement, the military says 12 soldiers and 2 civilians were killed in a bomb blast near Balad, Middle Shabelle. 2 soldiers were killed in separate blasts in the capital Mogadishu and at a restaurant in Densur. At least 16 people have been killed and several others wounded in 3 separate bomb blasts in Somalia. The military says 14 soldiers and 2 civilians were among those killed. Brazil has registered more than 1,200 new COVID-19 deaths and 63,000 cases overnight. The nationwide tally of cases is approaching 9 million. Meanwhile, Britain and European Union's row over ASTRAZENECA vaccine continues as Brussels rejected that the UK has first claim on doses produced at local plants. In Pakistan, more than 1,900 people tested positive and 64 lost their lives in the past 24 hours. This has pushed the nation's death toll over 11,500. Globally, the virus has claimed 2 million lives and infected more than 100 million people. And in cricket, South Africa have scored 37 runs for no loss in their second innings of the first test against Pakistan at National Stadium, Karachi. The Proteas trailed the Green Caps by 121 runs. Earlier, the hosts were bowled out for 378 runs in their first innings on day 3rd. Well, these were the headlines. News in detail coming after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back, and now the news in detail. The U.S. has paused the $8 billion weapons sale to Saudi Arabia and the UAE, authorized by former President Donald Trump. Talking to reporters, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said a review of the deal aims to ensure it advances U.S. strategic objectives. Blinken termed the move routine procedure for any new administration. Talking about Yemen, Blinken said the ongoing conflict and violations by warring sides have caused a severe humanitarian crisis, which is why he said the previous administration's call for sanctions on Houthis is being re-evaluated.
So it's vitally important, even in the midst of this crisis, that we do everything we can to get humanitarian assistance to the people of Yemen who are in desperate need. And what we want to make sure is that any steps we are taking do not get in the way of providing that assistance.
Speaking on Iran, he said Washington will rejoin the 2015 nuclear deal only if Tehran resumes complete compliance with the pact. And now moving on, the Iraqi army says it has killed 7 ISIS militants, including 3 group leaders in a counter-terrorism operation in the north. In a statement, the military said the terrorists were killed in a gunfight in Kirkuk city, Al-Chai Valley. It said several terrorists detonated themselves in their shelters after the raid. Earlier, the Iraqi forces in Kirkuk also foiled ISIS attacks and arrested 2 operatives on Wednesday. In 2017, Iraq declared victory over the terrorist group who overtook a third of the country in 2014. But in recent months, suspected militants have stepped up attacks, particularly between Kirkuk and Diyala province. At least 16 people have been killed and several others wounded in 3 separate bomb blasts in Somalia. The military says a bomb targeted a vehicle carrying military personnel near Balad, Middle Shabelle. In a statement, the military said 12 soldiers and 2 civilians were killed in that attack. It said after the bombing, a gunfight broke out between the army backed by the African Union peacekeeping mission and militants. The Al-Qaeda-linked Al-Shabaab group has claimed responsibility for the attack. Meanwhile, a blast in a restaurant killed a soldier and wounded at least 5 civilians in Dinsour in the southwestern Bay region. Over in the capital Mogadishu, a bomb blast killed a civilian and wounded 2 others. Brazil has registered more than 1,200 new COVID-19 deaths and 63,000 cases overnight. The nationwide tally of cases is approaching 9 million. Meanwhile, a Britain and European Union row where ASTRAZENECA vaccine continues, as Brussels rejected that the UK has first claim on doses produced at local plants. Globally, the virus has claimed 2 million lives and infected more than 100 million people. More on the coronavirus in this report.
As the world's fight against the coronavirus pandemic continues, the Global COVID Performance Index has ranked New Zealand, Vietnam and Taiwan as top 3 for successfully handling the outbreak. Some of the world's most developed countries, including Britain and the United States, are placed near the bottom of the list, which evaluated 98 countries' response to the crisis. The Americas only now account for 1 million COVID-19 deaths, making half of the global fatalities. Meanwhile, the White House official says it will take months before a vaccine is available to the general public.
We change the vaccine composition twice a year for the northern and southern hemisphere, and we're able to issue vaccines very, very quickly to combat the predominant flu strains every year. So there's no reason, even down the line, if this virus evolves to a point where our vaccines begin to lose effectiveness, we can adapt those vaccines, and I believe we can adapt those vaccines quickly.
AstraZeneca is set to produce more than 90 million coronavirus vaccine shots in Japan. Over in Europe, the EU has demanded Oxford's drug maker to spell out how it will supply the bloc with reserved vaccines amid a deadlock in crisis talks. Meanwhile, a study found that Pfizer's vaccine appeared to lose only a small bit of effectiveness against the new variant first found in South Africa. The World Health Organization says vaccines can be adopted to new variants if they impact the effectiveness of vaccines.
We're facing 2 constraining factors. The first is getting enough supply quickly enough. And the second is the ability to administer the vaccines quickly once they're produced and sent out to the sites. We are taking action to increase supply and increase capacity. But even so, it will be months before everyone who wants a vaccine will be able to get one.
Australia has extended its suspension of quarantine-free travel with New Zealand as the latter detected the 2 cases of the newly found variant. In Lebanon, at least 20 people were injured in clashes after security forces opened fire on protesters in the Tripoli district north of the capital, Beirut. Lebanese took to the streets for a 3rd day to denounce the deteriorating living conditions amid a strict lockdown to prevent the spread of the virus.
In Pakistan, 64 people have lost their lives to COVID-19 over the past 24 hours. This pushes the country's death toll to 11,514. The health ministry says 1,910 new infections were detected overnight. Currently, there are more than 33,000 active COVID-19 cases in the country. The health ministry says out of over 539,000 infected countrywide, more than 494,000 have recovered. The ministry said over 243,000 cases have been detected in the Sindh province, while Punjab has reported nearly 156,000 cases. In the capital city Islamabad, over 41,000 people have infected so far. The U.S. military says it flew a B-52 bomber over the Middle East to deter potential aggression amid tensions with Iran. The B-52 flew non-stop from Louisiana's Barksdale Air Force Base into the region. According to flight tracking data, the plane went over both the Persian Gulf and Saudi Arabia. The Central Command said the defensive mission was intended to show U.S. ability to deploy air power anywhere in the world. In a statement, the command said the flight showcased the U.S. commitment to regional security. This is the third such operation this year, but the first under President Joe Biden. The flights had become common in the last months of former President Donald Trump's administration. Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga says he has agreed with U.S. President Joe Biden to strengthen the bilateral alliance. This comes as Suga and the newly inaugurated American president held a telephonic conversation. Speaking to the media, Suga said they also agreed to arrange his visit to the U.S. as early as possible. The White House said the two leaders discussed Washington's commitment to Japan's defense and deterring North Korea. It said regional security issues, including China, were also discussed. The State Department has described the Washington-Tokyo alliance as a cornerstone of U.S. security interest in Asia. U.S. President Joe Biden has signed more executive orders to combat climate change. The dictates map out the direction for Biden's climate change and environmental agenda. They include the creation of new climate change positions and an interagency task force within a new U.S. administration. The latest sanctions also pause new oil and gas leases on federal land and cutting fossil fuel subsidies. The president emphasized the need for the U.S. to lead the global response to climate change.
Just like we need a unified national response to COVID-19, we desperately need a unified national response to the climate crisis, because there is a climate crisis. We must lead the global response, because neither challenge can be met, as Secretary Kerry has pointed out many times, by the United States alone. We know what to do. We've just got to do it.
The U.S. Homeland Security has warned of further potential attacks from domestic extremists like the Capitol Hill storming. In a statement, the DHS said a broad range of ideological motivated actors could incite or commit violence. It said a heightened threat environment will persist for weeks after President Biden's inauguration. Meanwhile, the U.S. has secured an indictment against 3 members of the far-right Oath Keepers militia. They're accused of conspiring the U.S. Capitol riots in a bid to stop Congress from certifying Biden's election victory. The charge can carry a maximum prison sentence of 20 years. Turkey says there is a window of opportunity for renewed dialogue with the EU after a turbulent 2020. Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu held a virtual meeting with his Dutch counterpart Stef Blok. Cavusoglu said the genius bilateral partnership can bring a change in vital subjects, including migration, trade, and other issues. The foreign minister said Ankara responded favorably after the bloc extended a hand to Turkey at the December summit. Blok said the two sides may have differences, but their partnership is strong enough to discuss them. Earlier, Ankara and Athens agreed to resume bilateral talks after a 5-year hiatus. Belarusian opposition leader Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya has urged the EU and the US to act against President Alexander Lukashenko. During an online event, Tsikhanouskaya called on the bloc to impose a further round of sanctions to help end Lukashenko's rule. She stressed the need to impose pressure on those responsible for human rights violations in Belarus. Tsikhanouskaya said the reaction of the international community to the political crisis in Belarus is modest. She repeated her call for fresh elections, saying the change could only happen with the help of Brussels and Washington. Belarus has been rocked by waves of protests since a controversial presidential election in August last year. More news stories coming up after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Video sharing site YouTube has suspended former U.S. President Donald Trump indefinitely. In a statement, the company said it will also prevent Trump's lawyer Rudy Giuliani from being able to monetize his clips. The statement read, Giuliani's account was barred from the partner program for posting misleading information about the U.S. election. The move comes a week after YouTube confirmed it would extend a ban on Trump's channel. The Google-owned firm has faced criticism over its slow response following the violence in Washington. The company has also faced backlash for proliferation of conspiracy theories on the platform. In Egypt, you can get your vaccine and eat it too. For an aspiring baker has made a cake resembling a vaccine vial, which she delivered to coronavirus patients at a Cairo hospital. Details in the following report.
Egyptian baker Amy Izzat is a woman on a mission. She knows the population is suffering from pandemic fatigue, so she's delivering hope and happiness to patients fighting the coronavirus in the form of cake. The gray and white cake has the words coronavirus vaccine glued on top with edible sugar sheets and fondant. It is meant to give patients a glimmer of hope that the pandemic will soon be over, especially now when the countries around the world have started vaccinating their populations.
I got the idea of making this cake as it's now been a year since the coronavirus pandemic started, and now the vaccine is being distributed around the world. I like to do this cake to give hope to patients fighting the virus, something to make them happy, something as simple as this to give them hope and make them happy. I hope the future will be better.
The baker has boxed and delivered the cake to the May 15 hospital in Cairo's Helvan neighborhood, which is being used as a quarantine hospital. The 3-layer vanilla sponge cake filled with raspberry cream with chocolate ganache coating took 3 days to make and decorate.
This cake took around 3 days for me to make. I baked it, added the filling, decorated it to look like a vial, and then used edible sugar sheets that people can eat for the writing.
Egypt has a record of more than 160,000 COVID-19 cases and nearly 9,000 deaths to date. Health officials say the real number of infections is likely to be much higher because of the low testing rate and exclusion of private testing results from official figures.
Climate change has had a tremendous impact on the people of Burkina Faso. Drought has become endemic, while violent floods have forced thousands of people to find refuge. Additionally, violence and the pandemic has made the country at the epicenter of the world's fastest growing displacement and protection crisis. Details in the following report.
In Africa's turbulent Sahel region, Burkina Faso has been hit hard by climate change. 1 out of every 20 people is internally displaced. Across the Sahel, refugees, internally displaced people, and their hosts are subjected to brutal violence, including rape and executions.
I left home because of insecurity. Terrorists came into our village and started killing people. That's why we came here to Kongausi.
The decreased rainfall and depletion of soil due to agriculture overexploitation, deforestation are the main causes of the hard impact of climate change. As the agriculture sector collapses, more and more people are struggling to find refuge. For now, the situation shows no sign of improving.
Climate change has become a threat multiplier. In this context, unsurprisingly, we are seeing conflict over farmland, conflict over grazing land, and access to water, as well as its impact on conflict between communities and security issues.
The COVID-19 pandemic has added a new layer of hardship for the refugees and further complicated efforts to support them. The United Nations Refugee Agency has obtained land from regional authorities to help the IDPs. UNHCR is also rehabilitating the refugee families who had to flee earlier this year. With minimum resources, it has become difficult to aid the larger number of internally displaced people.
Imagine these people who have had to abandon everything, all their belongings, to flee insecurity and find themselves in a situation of total despair here. And then they have to bear the brunt of situation linked to global warming. It's a double dose of human suffering, difficult to bear.
UNHCR has warned again that attacks by armed groups in the Sahel region will lead to further displacement in a region already hosting nearly 2 million IDPs and hundreds of thousands of refugees.
Now moving on to the business stories, Apple has reported holiday quarter sales and profits that beat Wall Street expectations. New 5G iPhones helped push handset revenue to a new record and sparked a 57% rise in China sales. Apple's revenue for the quarter ended December 26 rose 21% to more than $111 billion. Earnings per share rose to $1.68 from $1.25. Sales of iPhones were 65.60 billion compared with estimates of 59.80 billion. They beat Apple's previous quarterly all-time high of 61.58 billion for the first quarter of fiscal 2018. The company also posted strong sales of its Mac laptops and iPads in the quarter. It was driven by consumers working, learning, and playing from home during the pandemic. Germany has cut its growth forecast for this year to just 3%. This comes amid the economy facing persistent headwinds from the coronavirus pandemic. In a statement, Economy Minister Peter Altmaier said the official data shows the economy shrank by 5% last year. He said the services sector is badly hit, even though the industry is robust at present. The minister added the government is at the lower end of the spectrum of forecasts with its new 2021 outlook. In late October, the government had forecast growth of 4.4% for 2021. Bourses in the Asia-Pacific have tumbled after an overnight plunge on Wall Street wiped out the S&P 500's 2020 gains and left it in negative territory for the year. Mainland Chinese stocks are leading the losses. Shanghai Composite dipped 1.5%, while the Shenzhen Component dived over 2.5%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng has slipped over 2% as well. South Korea's Kospi and Australia's ASX 200 also plummeted almost 2%. The Nikkei 225 in Japan has declined more than 1.5%. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.